Thank you guys so much for being here for this live webinar, little teaching thing going on today. And as you can tell from the title, we're going to be talking about some very interesting stuff here, specifically about failure and success in your own ministry. So I'm going to share my screen here. And while you guys are here, I just want to thank you so much for joining me, for joining all of us here. It's pretty awesome to be able to hang out with some fellow Christians who are also taking some very proactive steps to grow closer to God and to grow their own ministry or Christ-centered business as well. So what is going on, everyone? Thank you so much for joining this webinar. It's Alec Casson here, and tonight I am going to be talking about the 3 myths that Christians believe about failure and the hidden biblical truth to achieving success in anything. Does that sound good? Cool. Well, I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that you don't like failing. Pretty much everyone dislikes failure. Maybe you've tried to send a text message and it failed, or you're taking a test that you studied for and it failed. Maybe you didn't study for it and you failed. Or maybe you had high expectations for a friend or family member and they let you down and failed you. Whether we're the ones failing or it's others who are failing us, we've all encountered the sting of failure at one point or another. And you know what? Failure sucks. See Karen there pointing at failure? She's saying it sucks. You know it sucks. Failure sucks. You agree? But I want to let you know that when it comes to failure, the anxiety or that fear that you feel when you're thinking of failure, or the feeling that you just want to give up when you fail, you should know that it's not your fault that you feel this way. As followers of Jesus, the Bible tells us that this feeling of fear and the discouragement that we get when we think of failure or when we do fail, these are things that are not from God. God does not give us this feeling of fear or this feeling of discouragement. These feelings, they're kind of like parasites because it's something foreign, something external that is latching onto us and is sucking the energy right from us. And the Bible says that God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. Now, do you see that? God does not give us a spirit of fear. The Bible also mentions that while we are here on earth, we will face many trials and sorrows, but excuse me, but Jesus says to take courage because he's overcome the world. Now, the Bible acknowledges that we will face difficult times, but since Jesus overcame the world and is king, we shouldn't let these difficulties discourage us. So not only does the Bible say that God does not give us a spirit of fear, but the Bible also tells us that when we face difficult times and even sorrow, that we shouldn't allow it to discourage us. So why then do we feel anxious, scared, and discouraged when we think of or encounter failure in our own lives? Well, the reason why is because a lot of us just weren't taught the right information about failure and success. In fact, a lot of us have encountered failure and have encountered success through school. You know, we've had these moments of failing at something or succeeding at something through this frame of how the school system presents things. And I don't know about you, but learning about failure from school totally did not prepare me for the real world. There's people out there, you know it, I know it, there's people out there who have failed at school but are succeeding in life. There's people out there who've done really well in school but aren't succeeding in life. So there are actually 3 very common myths that a lot of us Christians believe about failure, and I think it's these 3 myths that are really holding us back from achieving true success and greater experiences where we see God blessing our lives. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, we can work together to debunk those myths and finally put those fears and the anxiety to rest once and for all. Does that sound good? Great. So there are 3 myths, and if you're taking notes, then you might want to write these down. So those 3 myths are: myth number 1, if you fail, you should give up. Have you ever believed that? Now, there's myth number 2. You got to avoid failure at all costs. Sounds like some good advice, right? Well, we'll see about that. And we got myth number 3, that following Jesus, or heck, even following your passions or doing what you're good at, means that you're never going to encounter failures or difficulties. That sounds like a myth right there, doesn't it? Well, anyway, are you guys ready to dive in? Cool, so am I. So, myth number 1, if you fail, you should give up. Have you ever felt this way? You know, you mess up on something and you just want to abandon the whole thing entirely. Well, there's actually a story about a man named Thomas Edison. He was the inventor that created the light bulb. And on his journey to create the light bulb, he had a lot of good ideas for how to design it, but no matter how many designs he made, none of them worked. He kept trying though. And you know how many designs he went through? Not dozens, not hundreds, not even thousands. Eventually, Thomas Edison was on his 10,000th design, 10,000. All of them failing prior. And Edison was on his 10,000th design. You know, he was really hopeful for it. He was like, this is the one that's going to work. And in fact, he was so hopeful that he had his assistant there to witness the miraculous moment of turning on the world's first ever light bulb. And, you know, since light bulbs weren't invented yet, they blew out all the candles in the room, and the room was pitch black. And it was in this pitch black room that Edison flips the switch to turn on the bulb. And then this amazing thing happens, and it just explodes. Immediately it explodes. And the assistant, you know, he knew Edison had his hopes up for this, and assistant with this big frown on their face turns to Edison and says, man, I'm sorry that your 10,000th design was a failure. I want to know what Edison said in response. Edison said, I haven't failed. I just found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. That's pretty cool. You know, that's like some optimistic way to view it. And it's actually kind of funny. You know, it's pretty funny. But you can see that Edison knew. He knew that failure wasn't the opposite of success. I'm going to repeat that again. Failure is not the opposite of success. Rather, it's the road to it. And Edison knew this. You know, imagine if Edison actually believed the myth that if you fail, you should give up. And think about how different the world would be if we didn't have light bulbs. Light bulbs. And wouldn't you know it, after Edison's biggest failure with the 10,000th design that didn't work, it was actually design 10,001 that became the light bulb that changed the world as we know it. And since Edison didn't fear failure and saw it as part of the journey to success, he was able to help form the world as we know it today. But sadly, a lot of us out there are so afraid of failure that we try to just simply avoid it at all costs, which leads us to myth number 2. Myth number 2, avoid failure at all costs. Now, you know, it sounds like some pretty good advice, right? Because clearly, if you avoid failure, then the immediate assumption is that we'll just stumble into success. But like we said before, failure and success, they're not opposites. Failure is not the opposite of success. And avoiding failure, it's not going to guarantee success. In fact, this myth to avoid failure, imagine if you are in school. We're going to go old school here. Imagine you're in school, middle school, high school, whatever, college even, and there's a very difficult math problem. So you ask your friend, like, hey, this math problem is really difficult. Do you have the answer for it? And they turn to you and they're like, well, this is what the answer isn't. And it's like, okay, but what is the answer? They're like, well, it's not this. You'd be like, okay, but what is the answer? They're like, oh, well, I can tell you for certain it's not this. And you'll be like, dude, what the? Or think about it like this. Oh yeah, here's a little summary. Having all the wrong answers doesn't mean you know the right answer. And another example that you could think of is you're trying to go to Chipotle, or you're trying to go to Salad Works or something, and you plug it into your GPS, and you hear the GPS say, in 500 feet, don't turn right. I'd be like, what? In 1 mile, don't turn left. I'd be like, what are you doing here, GPS? That's not helpful. So, knowing where not to go doesn't mean you know where to go. These are kind of some ridiculous examples, but you can see that this myth, it's advice that's telling you to focus on what not to do when you should be focusing on what you should do. It's kind of like that story in the Bible when Peter was walking on water towards Jesus. Peter's focus, it started out looking at Jesus. And while Peter was focused on Jesus, he was able to walk on water. Talk about a pretty cool skill, right? But once Peter's focus was taken away from Jesus, that's the moment, right? That's the moment, I can't snap today. That's the moment when he began to sink. So you're kind of seeing the connection there. So you see, in the same way that the right answer doesn't come from knowing all the wrong answers, and knowing the right way to go isn't knowing all the not ways to go. Similarly, if you're trying to achieve success, it's not done by avoiding failure. It's achieved by focusing on the end goal, just like how Peter was walking on water when he was focusing on Jesus. And let's say you've got this focus. You're focused on the goal. You're super passionate about it. You genuinely feel like, oh, God's calling me to go to this end goal, and I'm just so focused on it. Does that guarantee that you won't encounter any failures or mistakes along the way? Well, let's look at this last myth and find out. Myth number 3, following Jesus or following your passions or doing what you're good at means you're never going to encounter failures or difficulties. Now, this is something that, deep down inside, we kind of know it's not true, or deep down inside, we kind of hope it's true. But it's something that's tripped up a lot of Christians and even non-Christians. Some of us were told that if we follow Jesus or we follow our dreams, then things will go smoothly for us. Look at that person. Woo, confetti, things are going smoothly. And if we were also told that if we don't follow Jesus or we don't follow our dreams, then our life's going to be really difficult. Look at that person. Oh, it's so difficult. I'm sweating, cold sweats. But some people have actually been told the opposite of this. See how the people switched? Some of us were told that following Jesus or following our dreams actually leads to more challenges and more difficulties. So then people assume like, oh, you can live an easier life if you don't follow Jesus or you don't follow your dreams. And what many do is they just try to choose the path that they think has the fewest challenges or the least failures. And I don't want to be the bad guy here. I got to let you know something. Following Jesus, not following Jesus, following your dreams or not following your dreams, either one, like no matter what you choose, you will face troubles, you will face challenges, and yes, you will even face failures. Remember that quote that Jesus said earlier? Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows. But take courage, because Jesus has overcome the world. So what do you do then? If no path guarantees no failures, no challenges, or actually better yet, better question, knowing that you will face challenges and failures no matter what path you take, why choose one path over the other? Well, the answer is in the outcome. You see, in the Bible, there's a verse that says, "For the Lord watches over the path of the godly, but the path of the wicked leads to destruction." And what I want you to focus on in this verse is the word destruction. The Bible says the path of the wicked leads to destruction. So although there are some jerks out there, some wicked people out there that are living a life that looks easier, maybe it looks less challenging, or it looks like they're experiencing less failures, it won't matter if in the end their path leads to destruction. And there's actually a really good story in the Bible that shows this, and that's the story of Joseph. Now, I'm not going to go into details of his story. I would recommend going on YouTube, watching some Bible Project videos talking about Joseph. You could even go on Netflix. You could watch was it King of Dreams or Prince of Dreams, something like that. Or just read it in the Bible for yourself. But basically, anyway, basically Joseph, he's a young boy. And he's probably like middle school, something like that. And he grew up in a family with 11 brothers. 11, that's a lot. I have one younger brother, and that's perfectly fine. I plan to only have 2 kids. I can't imagine having 11 kids, let alone 11 siblings to live with. But anyway, one night, God gave Joseph a vision about how he would be in a position of great power and authority. So Joseph, having this dream, he's like, this is awesome. I'm going to start telling people about this. So he starts telling his brothers and he starts telling his dad. And you know what? They all just started to laugh at him. I'm like, what do you mean you're going to be greater than us? What are you talking about? So Joseph's brothers got really annoyed by Joseph and his dreams. So they did what any person, I guess, would think of at that time, but they decided to kill him. But they changed their mind last second and decided to sell him as a slave instead, because why not make a couple bucks off of this? And to make a long story short, Joseph's life would continue to get very difficult from that day forward. And Joseph had a choice. He could choose to be bitter, or he could choose to be better, but he couldn't choose both. You can either be bitter or you can be better, but you cannot choose both. So despite having many opportunities to choose ungodly, easy options, Joseph continued to look to God and make the right choice, even though it was not the easy choice. Joseph continued to look for the right choice, the godly choice, even though it wasn't the easy choice. And for those of you who don't know, by the end of Joseph's story, God led Joseph to becoming the second most influential and powerful person in the entire world. Not just his house, not just his town or the city or the state, but the entire world. Not only did he gain wealth and influence, but he was able to restore his relationship with his brothers that sold him into slavery to begin with. There's this very famous quote from Joseph, and he's sitting there with his brothers. You can see this these images are from the Bible Project video that I had talked about earlier. But Joseph's telling his brothers, he's like, hey, you guys planned all this for evil, but God planned it for good, to save people's lives. But what do we learn from this story? What we learn is that we shouldn't try to choose a path simply because it's easy or least difficult. We should continue to look to God and go down the path of trying to be more like Jesus while pursuing our dreams. This is what leads to success. So, as I wrap up, I just want to say, choose the path that leads to life. Follow Jesus and your passions, despite there being challenges and failures along the way. In fact, I remember when I was graduating from college, I went to school to study to be a physical therapist. And as I was getting closer to graduating, it was just becoming more and more noticeable that God was not wanting me to continue to go down that path. And I was thinking, like, which path should I choose? Should I choose the path that God wants me to go down, or should I choose the path of just sticking with what I went to school for? And thankfully, God had given me some foresight to see that what I was wanting to deduce was which path is easier. And he's like, neither. If you want to go to school to be a physical therapist, go for it. There's going to be challenges. You're going to make some money. But at the end of it, are you going to be joyful? Are you going to be at peace? Are you going to be passionate about what you're doing? And I'm like, not really. And then the other path was let go of this stuff, use the skills that I've taught you along the way. And at the end, you're going to be passionate about what you're doing. You're going to be full of joy. You're going to be making a way more impact. But you know what? you're still going to face challenges. So am I willing to face challenges just to get to an endpoint that's like passionless, or should I face challenges, encounter failures, and have it eventually lead to a point of being passionate about what I'm doing and impactful with what I'm doing? And I decided, heck, if I'm going to be facing challenges either way, better choose the one that has the better end goal, you know? Second, when you're on that journey, remember to stay focused on that goal. Remember what I was talking about with, like, at the end, having the passion and the joy and the peace, like that stuff comes, that stuff you're going to encounter it on the journey, but it's also like that's the end goal as well. Lastly, failure is not the opposite to success. Rather, it's the road to it. So don't give up. And I believe that that quote about failure not being the opposite of success, I think that's from John C. Maxwell. He had actually written a book called Fail Forward. So if you'd like to dive more deeply into this topic of failure and success, I highly recommend reading this book. Or you can listen to it on YouTube. I think it's an audiobook on there as well. So that is the presentation. I hope that I was able to help you guys debunk those myths and just totally remove them from your life, because they will hinder your growth, they'll hinder your success, and heck, they're going to lead you down a path that you do not want to be going down. So as I wrap up here, if any of you would like to continue to learn this type of wisdom, you know, if this really spoke to you and you're like, dang, this was really helpful, thank you, Alec. I just want to first say, you're welcome, my pleasure. And second, I'd like to say you can continue to get some more resources. I have free resources on YouTube. You can just look up The Current Christian on YouTube. I've got videos on there. And I also had a podcast for people who have started ministries, people who are looking to run ministries, or they have Christ-centered businesses. And you can find that pretty much anywhere that there's podcasts, on Spotify, Apple. It's the Digital Ministry Mastermind Podcast. You can just look that up. It's 3 separate words: Digital Ministry Mastermind, and it should pop right up. And yeah, hey, I look forward to helping you guys more and more in the future. I really hope that God was able to speak to you through this teaching. And yeah, God bless. Continue to have a good one.